Hello, this is Kenny Williamson, and welcome back to another episode of Melchizedek Chronicles. In this episode, I am going to be talking to Aubrey Sanchez, and she is a woman who is going to tell us all about recognizing and overcoming parental narcissistic abuse. Now, Aubrey has, in her own words, has had lots of painful challenges in her life, including psychological abuse during her childhood. Okay. And now she is married and she is healing from all that stuff. And she's also a founder and CEO of an interior design firm called Autumn Rose, which is located in Bentonville, Arkansas. And she is also the leader of something called the Beauty for the Soul movement. And she is a coach, speaker, a host, and soon to be a published author. So I have Aubrey here on the phone with us in the studio, and she's going to tell us all about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Kenny. It's really good to be here. So I was really excited when I came across your podcast and you were open to have me on because this is something I don't get to talk about as often in the work that I do on a daily basis. It informs everything that I do, and it's a big part of who I am. And I don't talk as often about this direct subject. Like, my work is in interior design, and I do bring that into like well-being and mental and emotional health. Today I just get to share as much as I can about my story in the hopes that it will help others to recognize it when it's happening around them, or if it's something that they have encountered in their own past or whatever that may be. For me, it has been a long process, even just recognizing what went on for me in my childhood. That might sound a little strange. Like, obviously I was there the whole time. But when you're a kid, the things going on around you, like you think that it's normal, and you try to just make sense of it. And a lot of times for kids, what happens is, and I'm not a psychologist, I'm just speaking from my experience and what I've learned, right? What happens is you start to interpret the world as best you can. And usually what you conclude is, I need to do better or more. I need to be something else. If I was more of this, then I would feel safer or be more loved. And so it takes a long time to start unpacking those things and making sense of your inner world and like how you see things, before you may even realize that it even happened for you, let alone like recognizing it for someone else. So first of all, I guess like the really obvious question might be, well, okay, so what does that look like? Like, what is narcissistic abuse in someone's home, and how is that perceived and experienced as a child, right? And I guess part of my answer for that would be, it's actually a little harder to explain than it might seem. And every person's experience is going to be a little bit different. So I will say that, right? I can speak about my experience. My father was the narcissist in my home growing up. And I'm the oldest child, actually. Out of, there eventually were 10 of us. There were 6 of us at first. Well, it was me first, and then 5 siblings. Right. And then we adopted 4 more kiddos through foster care when I was in high school. So 10 of us eventually. And I was the oldest. And so, for those who aren't familiar, there's all these terms, there's tactics that narcissists are known to use. There's a lot of like vocabulary, right, around learning about this and understanding it. But anyway, there's one of the concepts is like golden child, scapegoat child. Okay. This is something that happens in parenting in particular with a narcissist, which is, so a golden child is someone who basically they are praised and rewarded for making the narcissistic parent look good. So they are in a dynamic where they behave in ways that make the narcissistic parent feel better about themselves And then the parent praises and rewards that behavior. And then a scapegoat child would be one who gets blamed basically for all of the family's problems, right? So the scapegoat children in my family, there wasn't just one, would basically, they would always be the problem and, why can't you do anything right, and taking the blame for everything. Where this got extra interesting in my family, I guess, is that my dad has a very high IQ. He's an extremely intelligent person. So, and his style of narcissism was very covert. So there are narcissists who are openly like explosive with their anger or physical abuse. Those kinds of things, you still have like mind games, but it is pretty straightforward when you tell someone, like even just when you do say to someone, well, yeah, my dad yells and screams at us every time this happens, or like those things are easier to sort of call out eventually, right? For someone to say to you, well, that's not normal. That's not healthy. That's not okay. My dad engaged in much more what's called hidden psychological abuse, meaning basically there's a lot to that, but I'll try to simplify it. Basically means that it wasn't just hidden from people on the outside. He was trying to hide it from us while he was doing it to us too. So we were taught to think that he was this really all the time I had friends who were like, your dad is like the coolest, like your dad's so funny. He's so great. Like, I wish my dad was like that. And we believed it. Like we saw him as this like larger than life, funny, gregarious, everyone loves my dad. So clearly all the like hatred and brokenness and confusion that I felt, I assumed was about me not being good enough. And so as I became an adult, I was mostly a golden child when I was younger, in that terminology, right? I was the oldest. I was super smart. I was talented and gifted. I picked up instruments easily. So like I was one of the golden children, right? And then what happened is as I started to gain my independence, now it might sound like that's a good deal, but it's not, because you actually are trying, everything you do in your life when you're a golden child is to try to keep that in place. And so everything you do is out of a fear of being bad at something, or being found out to not be as smart as you are, or like this constant manipulation that you start engaging in to try to feel safe. So you start trying to be someone you're not, do things and never mess up. And that's kind of how that feels. And then as I went off to college, I had this deep need. I didn't know why yet, but I had this deep need for total independence. I didn't want financial support from my parents. I didn't want to live at home. I wanted out of there. And I hadn't even started to break this down. But what started to happen was I began to be discarded, which in like a relationship, a narcissistic relationship, a discard would be like a breakup or, things like that. But, as a college aged kid, I was being discarded by my father, because he was no longer in my life enough to take credit for anything I was achieving, or, and I was no longer willing to make it about him. And so I slowly morphed in his world into like a scapegoat child. So as I became an adult, but he still would use me as a golden child to my siblings. So to my face, I was a scapegoat. And to my siblings, why couldn't they be more like me? Like I was pitted against my siblings without me knowing it, to where they were all being told, you should be more like Aubrey, you should do this, you should do that, And meanwhile, to my face, he didn't care about anything going on in my life. I wasn't good enough, and I was making him look bad. So anyway, that's a pretty like quick, quick, rough rundown on like kind of what I'm coming from. So now I go to like explain what exactly happened. And it's like, I can share one interaction and it's like, okay, yeah, I can see that that's not healthy. But until I tell you a pattern, like when I was this age, this happened. And then when I was this age, then this happened. And then this happened later. And then this, and I show you the arc, like the whole plot.
Right.
Then you start to see that he wasn't just self-centered. He was consciously like this. I'm not using these words lightly. Like this is with lots and lots of trying to understand and talking to people and like learning a lot, starting to finally see, okay, this whole plot, this pattern, all these experiences added up shows a pattern of someone not just being self-centered or unaware or lacking empathy, but deliberately undermining my sense of security in myself so that I would be dependent on his approval. And so it's actually this very calculated, like breaking down. And I know that's a very big, like accusation, but like calculated, like that was intentional. I'll give you an example. And I've now, since learning it for myself, I've talked to other siblings and learned how they experienced it. But basically, strengths that we each had were turned into weapons against us. So I had a strength of being articulate and really good with language and with words and ideas. I loved to discuss ideas and go deep on them, and I could put it into, I constantly have people like, wow, that was such a cool way that you phrased that or explained that, like you're so articulate. I get that all the time. And when people say that to me, I go, oh no, my conditioning kicks in, right? And I go, oh no. And this is what I was taught to believe about me. Okay. I was taught to believe that I was being manipulative of other people by how good I was with language. I was taught that I was a know-it-all and that no one likes the know-it-all, that I was, and that I was like I'm trying to think like how this was like, it wasn't always worded. It was kind of in like the reactions, like the sarcasm and the like, oh, Aubrey's going on about something again. Or do you know what I'm like? It's this really hard to pin down, but you know the impact in yourself because you go, oh, I cringe when someone tells me I'm great with language or like that I'm articulate. Like what in the heck? Like why would that be a bad thing? Oh, well, maybe I'm trying to. And with my sister, it was that she was funny and she was taught. She was like adorable and cute and funny. And like, she would just do things and everyone would just be like, oh my gosh, and like laugh. And she was taught that she was manipulative because she was trying to be funny or trying to make people laugh at her. And so when people are like, oh my gosh, you're so cute. Like everything you do is just funny and adorable. She's like, oh no, I'm a bad person. Like I'm manipulating people.
Now that would probably fall under, because I've done several podcasts on narcissism, and I've noticed that most narcissists are attention seeking. I mean, They want all the attention to be on themselves. So like you're saying there, basically if somebody else can do something, anything, and it takes attention off of them, they want to dismiss that other person in any way they can. So the attention can be back onto them.
100%. Exactly. And so you're in this dance. Here's the dance. The dance is, don't be so bad at things that you make me look bad, because you represent this family and you represent me and my parenting and my genetics, right? So like, make me look good, but don't outshine me. Make me look good, but don't take the attention away from me, right? So that's exactly it. So you would get shamed and belittled if you seemingly failed at something or kind of, made a fool of yourself, is how they would look at that. And at the same time, like my sister, everyone's attention going to her because she naturally, and now she's getting into performing. She's becoming a singer, and I'm so over the moon for her, like so happy. But like that came naturally to her to just shine and smile and draw attention and make people laugh and feel good, and that took the attention away from our dad. And so that was something she was taught to hate about herself. Yeah, exactly. And me being smart and good with words was something that I was supposed to be ashamed of and not go too far with it. But I also shouldn't, look stupid or say anything, right? I shouldn't say anything clumsy or unintelligent sounding, but I shouldn't get praised for how good I'm with it.
So like your example you gave there, do you have other examples? Like, let's say we have, some young girl living at home and one of her parents is a narcissist. What are some of the obvious signs that you could tell somebody that they look for these signs? And if this keeps happening, this person is a narcissist and this is what they're doing to you.
Right. And I love that because that's what people need. Right. And then I also kind of laugh because I'm like, obvious signs of hidden abuse is really challenging. But here's what I will say. First of all, if someone in your life will not ever be accountable for affecting others, for their part in something, for, hey, I realized that I hurt you when I did that. I want to do better. How can I help you through this? What can I do better? All of us are going to be defensive sometimes. I'm not saying any, imperfect relationship patterns mean someone's a narcissist. I'm saying constant. If they say sorry, they still find a way to blame you. They still find a way to twist it. And gosh, I'm trying to think. So some of the things that really started to show up where I got really clear on it was when I would recognize that almost he couldn't see me. When I started to recognize that as soon as I started talking about my interests, I would get home from college. This was when I was starting to figure it out a little more, right? I would get home and visit, and it was the things he cared about. So he cared about grades, what I was, how I was doing with grades. Gosh, was there anything else he cared? I'm trying to remember. I don't even think there was anything else. I would get home and he would ask me about that. Oh, and my teachers. He was a professor, right? So he wanted to know if the other teachers were as funny as him and as great as him, right? And then I would be like, oh, and guess what? I met this really cool new person that we're friends now, and I'm doing this, or I got involved in this club, and his eyes would glaze over. Oh my gosh, is she still talking? He would immediately start to lose interest, lose attention, drift off, and he would sometimes just walk away right in the middle of a sentence of mine, or start some other conversation with somebody else, So that was an indicator that I started to recognize. And just massive criticism constantly of us and everyone else. And he would step in and take over things, because we weren't doing them good enough. So those are some of those indicators that were pretty telltale things, I think, of that pattern. I don't know. So I might think of others. If I think of anything else, as I get talking, I'll share it too. But
so yes, like you were saying, your dad was basically a covert narcissist, and if a lot of people don't understand what the covert is, like you're saying, in a book here that I read about narcissists, one of the examples of a covert was with Little Red Riding Hood. Okay. So the wolf was the covert. So he was pretending to be the grandma. And actuality, he was a wolf pretending to be something he wasn't, hiding in order to suck somebody into his little, basically he wanted to trick her into falling into his trap. So the wolf in this case is engaged in basically covert operation because he's disguised himself. You see what I'm saying? To trick somebody. So I think
100%.
that's a pretty good example of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's exactly what it's like. And so, yeah, so like as a kid, this is what dads are like, I guess, or this is what being loved, your family loves you, right? Like, so this is what it means to be loved. You just gotta not look bad, and you gotta do all the right things, and also don't succeed too much or look too great or whatever. Yeah, it's all this like, you think it really is your grandma, in the Red Wolf example. Like, you think this really is like your loving parent figure who cares about you more than anyone in the world. So, like, if if you're not good enough for this person, like, that's the belief you can walk away with real quick. Is you walk out of that home and go off to live your life, and you think, man, that's as good as it's going to get. Like, those are my parents, like, they love me. So
Exactly.
So I better never mess up, and I better not, look too good or make too much money, but I better not mess up or do anything problematic or it's a mind game, minefield.
Exactly. I've noticed that the covert narcissists, like you're saying, they want to make somebody else feel bad. Okay. But of course, at the same time, they want to make it your fault. So no matter what happens, you did it. It's your fault. You're basically the scapegoat, like what you said. And so, and like you said, even if they'll never admit they've done anything wrong or take any accountability for anything they've done, it's always you. And if they somehow do try to take it, they still say, well, I did do this. I'm sorry for that, but it's still your fault.
Exactly. Or like, I'm sorry you feel that way. Or like,
right.
I'm sorry that you're, wrong about this and that it hurts your feelings, like they won't even be that obvious necessarily, but that's the message under how they're saying it, or they'll act super sincere and then they'll make it about them. Like, gosh, so that's another version, is where people will kind of go like, and my dad didn't do this so much, but I have seen this where some narcissists will even take it all the way back to them in a really sneaky way. Like, I'm the worst. I don't even know why you put up with me. I'm just, and guess what? They're still making it about them, even if they're even if they're acting remorseful, right? But it won't ever be backed up by change or by, any sort of sincere effort, right? It's words, right? Their words will not match their behaviors. That's one thing. If you just step back long enough and just watch and try to not get sucked into the emotions of it, just notice if their words match their actions and their behaviors. When they say they're sorry about something, do they ever change that behavior at all, or even try to? Right. Right.
Yeah, I used an analogy of that, of course, out of the Bible, and one of them where said basically, you can, like the Bible says, you can tell a tree by the fruit that it bears.
Mm-hmm.
So, somebody says, hey, I'm doing this. You just step back and watch, like you said, and you see what kind of fruit they're bearing. And if the fruit they're bearing doesn't match what they say, well, then, they're lying. So, yeah.
Exactly. That's it. And I was also led to believe that, I was supposed to trust certain people. Like, it was never something I understood until quite recently. And I'm in my late 30s. Okay. And I have, in the last couple years, began to learn that it's okay for me to need time to learn that I can trust someone, that I don't have to just give out trust to show that I'm a good person. Like, I'm a good person, so I'll trust you because I'm supposed to. That's what I'm supposed to do, is to trust. That's how I was raised. I was taught that I was supposed to trust. And I was supposed to assume that the other person was being honest and sincere and that they cared about me. That was my job, to just take that and believe it, no matter what evidence was contrary to it.
Instead of them earning the trust?
Yeah, instead of him being a trustworthy person, right? Showing up in a way that I could trust him, right?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I've seen that myself, not with not with a parent, but with other people, where
Yep.
they just like, they're like, well, I said this, so then you need to believe it.
Exactly.
It's like, well, but your words aren't matching your actions, and why would anybody trust you to begin with? Anything you say seems to be the truth. So it's like, well, I said it, so that's it.
Yeah, and then if you're like, well, I don't trust you, then it becomes about you. Then it's like there's something wrong with you. You don't know how to trust people. You're afraid to trust. You have trust issues. You get what I'm saying? Like they pathologize your like inability to trust them to put it back on you instead of, well, why do you feel that you can't trust me? Okay, let's work on that. Like, I would like to have your trust. So what can we do about it? Right? Like they will pathologize your unwillingness to trust them if you do start to not trust them. So, right. And then the really interesting dynamic too in all of this, and this is something I've learned too, is that the first 7 years of life are particularly interesting. There's a big shift, around age 7, 8. And before that, kids are actually in like a very different kind of mental space than they begin to be in after. And it's almost like a hypnotic state. Okay. It's basically like, and you can kind of get what I'm saying if you like watch kids or remember being a kid. You're kind of just like, the world is around you, but you're sort of in this flow. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but you're just sort of like, that's the reason kids like dilly dally on their way to go get in the car and go somewhere, because they're not like, oh yeah, we're on a schedule. They're like, mom's stressed. Ooh, look at this flower. Oh, hey, I want to touch this thing. Right. Okay. So they're just in this flow, but kids under age 7, especially, are absorbing the world around them like crazy. And, I forget his name, but, I think it's the author of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book that I've heard teach this, which is the idea that you almost are like downloading programs. It's like a child is basically downloading programs for how to live in this world, in this society that we're in, right? How to handle being around people and how to manage, how to not get hurt, how to take care of yourself, right? How to eat, how to brush your teeth, how to make a friend, how to deal with your emotions, right? You don't sit down and get taught that in a classroom. You learn it by being around it and absorbing it. And then after that, you run the program. So you can change them. Neural pathways are changeable, but it's really hard and it takes a lot of deliberate action to change a neural pattern that was built in childhood. So there is everyone who's been affected by narcissistic abuse can absolutely learn from each other, support each other, and understand and have compassion for a lot of what it is. And there is this interesting dynamic when someone was being immersed in those kinds of patterns as a child, it completely affects how you see everything. Like, and I think when you're in, the PTSD of any narcissistic relationship and stuff, that can start to really affect your brain for sure. And I've been basically spending the last 15-ish years, I guess, and especially the last 3 years, really working to let go of beliefs that I have lived by for a very long time. And those beliefs were driving me to depression, anxiety, numbing out, like food, phone, like whatever, right? Just trying to be numb. And that, those are the fruits. Like when you talk about by their fruits, you shall know, those are some of the fruits of seeing the world through this distorted glass of how you thought it was and what you thought it meant about you. What I thought it meant about me. I'm never going to be lovable. I'm never going to be enough. I just have to constantly hustle and try to prove myself to everyone. It's the only way. That's what I thought. So.
Yeah. So basically your dad obviously has been doing this, started when you were young and ingrained these things into you because you absorbed it. And then later on, you're like saying, you're still trying to get those thoughts out of your head. So, I mean,
exactly.
what are some of, just like in a list, if you know, a simple, what are some of the things that this has caused that's made you, what has it made you, like not like people, not trust people? I mean, what are some of the things that these have caused you?
Yeah. Well, I will not give you a whole list because it's a long one. But okay, so some of the big ones, I went and started a business, okay? And turns out I was 1 foot on the gas pedal, 1 foot on the brake pedal. Because guess what? If you go start a business and your brain is in this zone, you know, here's the story in my mind. I better not fail. No one will ever love me if I prove what a failure I am by failing at this business. But I also better not, guess what? Outshine anyone. So I better not make more money than other people. I better not look like I'm stuck up if I post stuff online. I better not, okay? Like, that is a recipe for crazy making, to try to run a business where you are terrified of failing and you're terrified of succeeding. Like, oh no, what if I succeed? That would maybe be worse. Like it would be unimaginable and I would be unlovable if I fail at this. And it would be even worse if I was great at it. Because my dad tried to start a business, you know, and what if like, it's scary. And what if nobody wants to be my friend because I'm good at what I do? Like,
right. So
I'm glad that I can laugh about some of these things now because I'm like, doesn't that sound so ridiculous? But it didn't to me. It was like, no, really, who would want to be friends with someone who's stuck up and has a bunch of money and, you know, thinks they're all that, right? Like,
right. So
that was one of the beliefs.
So you're feeling guilty then for trying to succeed, but at the same time, you're like, you know, if I succeed too much, you know, I'm a bad person because I've actually done something. But and so at the same time, you're like, well, the thing is, I also can't fail because I'll be an embarrassment. Exactly. And so I can't really do either. So you're just kind of in limbo.
Yeah, you're trying to like just hover in midair. Like, like I can't jump high. I can't fall to the ground. Like it's crazy making, like you seriously. So that's one example. Other things. Okay. One of the things for me, and I've talked to like one of my brothers, for example, who was a scapegoat and he did not experience this. So this is probably more so for a golden child. Another thing I experienced is I am a people person. I love relationships and people and friends and parties. I'm very extroverted. And what that looked like for me though, coming from this background was I was almost creepily masterful at like reading everyone in the room. Like I was obsessed, to be honest with you. I was like obsessed with what people were thinking about me. And even when they were talking about random other things, I was trying to study like what they liked about other people. What did they look for? What did they criticize? Like I was seriously, every circle of people I was hanging out with, I was trying to learn, oh, she can't stand it when people do this. And he thinks that this is really stupid. And oh, that person really likes it when people do this. And I was like constantly studying it and trying to be aware of it. And how are people feeling? Who in the room is sad? Who is excited? And I felt like I needed to know all of that and then use it to make sure I was accepted and liked and loved and not criticized, not rejected, didn't get too much attention, didn't make anyone feel bad, right? Helped everyone to feel good about themselves and about me. This constant, and that can look and sound a lot like being an empath, which maybe I naturally somewhat am, but I was taught that that's where some of my safety came from, was being obsessed with how I was perceived by others and how they were feeling and what I could do to manage how they felt and how they saw me.
Oh, well, that's manipulation right there, isn't it?
That is manipulation. That's exactly right. I was trained to manipulate in order to feel safe.
Right. So you were in
That's
effect
exactly right.
acting like a narcissist in that area,
Yes.
trying to do the
Yes.
same thing. Okay.
Yes. Even when like my heart was like, I love people, I want to help, and I would do it in manipulative ways. And I believed, and I literally am in a 12-step program for codependency. And this is basically what I am working to release, is manipulating and trying to control how people see me. That's what I am actually in, like essentially an addiction recovery model for that. Because I would use it to try to help people, but you can't help people by manipulating them. I wanted so badly to be a good person and to help them and not hurt them, but I needed to be accepted and liked by them in the process. And so really I was using people to try to feel safe, but I kept trying to help them. But until I recognized that that wasn't the way to ever help someone, you have to actually be honest with people. You have to actually take care of yourself first. You know, when I started to learn those things, it was first of all, it was a hard blow. Like, you're telling me I'm a dishonest person? You're telling me I'm using people? Like, that's horrible. Like, I don't want to be that person. That's not who I am, you know? But that was what survival meant in my home. You had to play the game, right? Or you would be crushed. And so, yeah, you're 100% right. That's exactly what it is manipulation. And it is freaking exhausting. Like, it is, it's awful. It's not a fun place to be trying to live your life. So
I imagine going in there and worrying about everybody else and what they're thinking, what they're doing, and constantly worrying about everybody else. So just going in there and being yourself and being happy.
Exactly. You can't be happy when you're trying to live like that. You can't.
Yeah.
You know, like, there's no room for you. There's no room for you to be a whole person and to have opinions and to be okay with someone not liking you. Because guess what? If you're an honest, real person and you show up and let people see you, someone's gonna not like you. Like, that's just life. And if you can't accept that, then there's no room to be yourself ever. And for me, it was even behind closed doors. Like, cause I wasn't willing to be overtly dishonest. Like, I wanted to see myself as a good person too, right? So I wouldn't close the door and then like be whoever I wanted. I was, even when no one was around, it was like, I got to be the kind of person. I have to be the kind of person that they will respect and like and be friends with, like, right now, so I can be honest about it later. You know, like, anyway, yes. Right. So those are a couple of examples. I mean, like I said, I could go on and on. There's a lot. I feel like a couple of the really big ones for me, how I interacted with people and obsessed over trying to read them and manipulate them. And, the terrifying, crippling fear of failing or succeeding. Oh, another way it showed up for me, and this is related to that fear of success, but it's a little different. Fear of visibility, which is really challenging when you have business dreams, like get on a TEDx stage and write a book. Like, right. You can see how visibility would be kind of important for something like that, right? So that's another mental effect that had on how I think and see things, is that it's very scary for me to be visible. And the main reason, I guess, for that is that I associate the attention being on me with getting torn down, right? So if, just like you called out really early on, like if the spotlight went to me too much, right, for too long, or I looked too good, then what would inevitably follow was being criticized, mocked, torn down. And so it's very challenging for me to stand up and speak up and let people hear my thoughts, let people see me being myself. Because I'm learning to breathe through that and to, find my peace and let go of how they're going to see me. But the instinct is to tighten up and to want to do pretty much anything in the world other than stand up and get on that stage or on that computer and let people hear and see me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I can understand that.
Yep.
Especially when you know you've been beat down to think that, that is obviously wrong, and you can't do it. And of course, the covert narcissist, or any narcissist really, the reason they're telling you that is because it takes, takes the attention off of them and makes them seem less important,
Exactly.
So, cause they have a big inflated sense of self-importance,
Which they have to keep up, because under that is a devastating lack of, anyway, we could go into it, but under that inflated ego is a very fragile ego that they themselves can't confront and face. So they have to keep puffing up and constantly feeding this illusion ego they have of themselves and trying to believe it themselves. And so if anything threatens that, that's bad. So the cardinal sin, okay, me getting up and looking good and, people praising and seeing me, that feels scary. What feels terrifying is this right here. Like the cardinal sin, right, for this type of a parent is not only that you would get up and get visible and let people see you and hear you and be authentic, but that you would actually speak the truth about them.
Mm-hmm.
Because of all the things you could get up on a stage and say or do, that's the one that will the most quickly anger them. And so that's particularly scary. So anyway, those are some of the big ones. I also have a lot of body image issues from my dad. Basically tried to control. Sorry, sirens in the background. My dad basically was interested in controlling like what me and my sisters wore and how we looked. It wasn't just like some sort of general concept of modesty. It was also like, even if what we were wearing was by their standards considered modest, if I looked too good wearing it, then that was still not okay. So I was also given a lot of anxiety and fear about do you want to pause it with all this? Can you hear all that?
I can hear some sirens in the background. Yeah. Not much.
We have 2 huskies and they howl when the sirens go by.
Oh.
So there's sirens and then the huskies are, oh. Anyway, I can keep going. So anyway, it wasn't just like a general sort of good concept of modesty. It was like this deeper sense that if I draw any kind of eye or look good in any kind of way, that was also this really tightly controlled dynamic in my family. So
obviously that right there would be because they want the attention on themselves. They're attention seeking, right? Obviously.
Yeah, and it went a little deeper than that. It also was related to my dad. I got to piece this together later, but my dad had some like compulsive sexual behaviors that were some of his acting out behaviors. And honestly, like my take, I was growing up, right? And my developing, growing body that was increasingly sexual was really challenging and confronting for him, because he didn't want to see people, women in general, girls, he didn't want to see any of that as, like, he didn't want to connect people that he was objectifying in his compulsive sexual behaviors, he didn't want to see the humanity in them. And so if he started to see, so yes, he didn't want us to take the attention or anything, but he also didn't want to let his worlds collide at all. He didn't want to be pressured into seeing the humanity in everyone that he preferred to sexually objectify and use. And so he needed us to be as asexual as possible, to not look or seem or express any of that, so that he could be more comfortable, basically, and not have to confront anything he didn't like about himself.
I see.
Yeah.
Right. So in other words, if he's objectifying women, that look a certain way, let's say, that dress a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
and then his own daughter turns around and dresses similar because, let's say, that's the style. It's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily because he didn't like the clothes or something. In actuality, if it was on somebody else, he really liked it, but now it's his daughter wearing it. And of course she's a person, like you're saying. So now he has to be
Mm-hmm.
like, he doesn't want that to be a connection there, I guess is what you're
Right.
saying.
Right. Yeah. And someone who, humans are sexual, right? We're all sexual. So like someone who wants, at the end of the day, who is a sexual person, can appreciate someone else's, beauty, or like that they are good looking and that they may have some appeal in that way, like, and who genuinely also sees people as people and like cares about having friendships, cares about that if they are in a romantic relationship, they want to show up for that relationship and care about that whole person, right? Like have a sexual relationship and an emotional relationship and connection and like, be partners in life, right? Like that would be like a healthy, like way of seeing other human beings, right? Then you could say, yeah, that person is a really attractive person, and I'm sure they're also a nice person, and I'm sure they, have their own life, and that's fine, right? Like I can keep that in balance and in check, right? But if I have no interest in checking that at the door, and I want to basically in my marriage, in my pornography use, in any of my sexual relationships, if I want to simply use and take and destroy and not care, then I need to try to continue to see those people as objects so that I don't have guilt about how I'm behaving and how I'm treating people. So, yeah, so your own daughters, like more and more resembling the women out there that you want to objectify and use,
right,
becomes a threat to their sense of self and their sense of like ego, in which they're the best, they're awesome, right? But they don't necessarily want to be confronted with how they're objectifying people and how they might even be looking at their own daughter because they can't keep it in check, which is why I would go to finally look at these stories when I hadn't forever, right? I had just lived them. And then I would go to share a specific story of like being objectified and looked at by my dad in a way that was awful. And I would go to share it like as an adult, like in my 30s. Okay. And I would go to share it for the first time with someone who was supporting me in healing. And I would just shake, right? I would just shake telling this story. And I thought, what did I think back then when it was happening? I thought I was disgusting and horrible and evil, like innately evil. Like I thought there's something evil and horrible and disgusting in me, and I have to protect people from it. Like that's how I saw my body and my sexuality. This is this evil, horrible, disgusting thing about me, and I can hurt people with it, and I don't ever want to ever let anyone see it in me or hurt them with it. And so I just thought I was scared for anyone to when I started to get honest and to stop manipulating, right? That piece, when I started to say, okay, I want to show up honest. I no longer want to manipulate people into liking me. I want to be real. I was invited to get to know myself better and to start, like building a relationship with myself. Like, hey, do I even like me? Who am I? What do I like? What do I think about things? What do I like to do? Right? Get to know myself. Like I was dating myself. Right. And I was scared. I was like, I don't want to do that. and I had a therapist asking me like, well, what are you afraid you'll find if you get to know yourself, if you go deep? What do you think you'll find there? And it was like, I think I'll find darkness and yuckiness, and that I'll learn once and for all that I really am unlovable and horrible and disgusting. And it wasn't until I told those stories as an adult that I went, man, my dad was saying those things to me and looking at me like that. Like that is disgusting. I wasn't disgusting. That behavior towards me was disgusting, right? I didn't even reframe that until I started to share that in adulthood with people who could help me hold perspective, right? So.
Right. Yeah. That's, any kind of behavior like that, from your parent as a child, making you, feel disgusting about yourself, making you all those different things. I mean, yeah, that's disgusting in itself, is
exactly
the way the parent's doing,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, making
a kid. And you have to undig that stuff and actually look at it later and go, like, even though it's painful to look at it, you got to pull it back up and look at it and go, wait a minute. It wasn't me that was disgusting about this. It was the way I was being treated and looked at. So.
Right. So like with your dad, you were saying, like, of course, if somebody's listening to this that, has no idea what some of this stuff is, but like your basics, if you have more than one child, sometimes these narcissist parents will pick one and they're the good kid, the golden one, mm-hmm. and then you've got the bad mm-hmm. one. And whether they're not bad, but the parent blames everything on this one and elevates mm-hmm. the other one.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's one of the biggies. As
there could be more than one child. Like there could be a couple of each.
Mm-hmm. As I have read where a narcissistic parent will do that, they'll elevate one and baby the one, and mm-hmm. the one thinks they actually grow up thinking that they really are that special and important. And they themselves later on in life become a narcissist because now they're expecting mm-hmm. it. They're like, well, now I'm special, because they believe it, because the parent treated them as such. And now they're like, I'm a special person, so I need all the attention. And so then they start living their life out basically as a narcissist. Correct.
Yes. And a golden child or a scapegoat child can actually, both of those can morph into narcissism in that child when they grow up, and they can also morph into codependency and other types of like brokenness, right? Where like both a golden and a scapegoat can go either way. So
I can see the scapegoat becoming a covert where you're trying to sneak around and manipulate. You're trying mm-hmm. to make other people look bad to shed the light onto you so you'll look a little better,
Exactly. Trying to outrun those beliefs about yourself that you're the problem and you're,
Yeah. So you're the bad one. And so then you start developing these different narcissistic traits, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
to try to get people to look at you. So now you're purposely doing things to cause people problems, doing it behind covertly. Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly right. That totally can happen. So yeah. And like, it's painful when you do start to look at these things, because there's some like things that you might have thought that were really good and beautiful things in your life that you have to sort of grieve and part with a little bit. Like in the ways that I was a golden child, it was actually a little bit less about like that I was actually special and more about that I was being used and being taught all sorts of really crappy ways to see myself and see other people. And like then you have to sort of like let that come crumbling down, you know. And hey, all the time I thought, you know, I wasn't very lovable, but I thought, man, like I'm so lucky that like my parents love me even though I'm so unlovable. And really starting to break that down and deconstruct it and go, okay, you know what, actually, like the way I was being treated, in particular by my dad, like was not love. Like, I mean, that's not it, you know, that's not how that looks. And so like, that was hard. Like, okay, well, actually the way I always wanted to be loved and approved of by my dad, I got to let go of wanting that. And it's natural that I did and that I do. It's very, very instinctive to crave the love and the acceptance of a parent. And I had to say, he wasn't available for that. He never really saw me for who I am. So I relate with songs where, like, you know, the parent has died, you know, my dad has not. I relate with those songs because I've grieved that relationship. Does that make sense? I've grieved what I thought it maybe was in order to accept a more real version of the world in which I've had to let go of some things, but I'm also actually able to have peace and to be myself, and to really work towards my goals instead of self-sabotaging constantly. So those things are well worth the effort and the pain of deconstructing it. And you really can't do that alone either. I mean, you can try, but like, I have needed support. And that's, you know, that is like therapy and formal programs. And it's also just learning who you can actually trust. That the whole thing, starting to learn what it looks like when someone's actually a trustworthy person, and then finding some trustworthy people who will support you and like that you can call when you're like, everything seems backwards right now. I'm spiraling, right? I'm seeing myself as a total failure, or like I'm avoiding this thing I need to do for my business that would have me being visible, like those kinds of things, and being able, and, you know, I'm sabotaging my marriage relationship by doing this, or, you know, a lot of people will come from a childhood like this and choose a lot of those dynamics in their marriage. And, you know, I did some of that, not, you know, I did not marry a narcissist, but, I did marry someone who has, a lot of his own trauma and like his own patterns of behavior that he and I both were feeding a cycle that wasn't very healthy for a long time, and had to stop and back it up and, you know, learn about, and still are learning about, attachment styles and healthy conflict and what it really looks like to make room for both of us in a marriage where we can both be ourselves and then together work towards things, right? Without it being competitive, like me versus you, and one or the other of us can succeed, but not both, and all that stuff. So,
right. So, yes, I mean, is that, I guess that's some of the advice you would give. What is just some of the basic, I mean, would you tell somebody that this going through this, just go out and find somebody you can talk to? Is that what?
Yes, 100%. Like, yeah, you have to start talking about these stories. And when in my marriage and stuff, that felt kind of tricky, because it was like, well, you know, like my husband doesn't want me, because some of the deconstructing started to happen when it was like, what's going on in my marriage? What's going on in my business? Why am I self-sabotaging in my business? Why am I in these patterns in my marriage? Why can't I be happy? And then that's when it started to get more and more clear where those patterns of thought came from and where those beliefs came from. That's when I started to get really clear on what had happened in my childhood, was actually when the fruits were showing up all over my life, right? And so, yeah, being able to talk to someone, and even if it is about your marriage, like, I know you don't, here's the thing. This is not a black and white thing. It doesn't mean it's always fine to just talk to whoever about like the details of your marriage. That's not what it means. That would break trust, right? And so it's not about like going out and just, you know, talking crap about your spouse with your friends. Like, that's not what this looks like. But it is about having safe people, therapists, someone you trust at church, a very dear friend that has shown that they are trustworthy and honest and respectful, and finding people that you can be really honest with and say, this is what's going on. I'm not okay. This keeps happening. Here's how I'm self-sabotaging, right? And being able to talk and get support, because then you start to learn maybe the way you thought the world worked doesn't quite work like that. And maybe this isn't normal. And, and even if it's a romantic relationship that you're in, like, you need to be able to talk to someone you trust and say, is this okay? Is this normal behavior? And if you're asking that, there might be a reason why you feel unsettled or why you don't think it's healthy. If someone doesn't want you to talk about them ever to anyone, that could potentially be a red flag. Like, that could be a potential warning sign that that person wants you to stay seeing them a certain way, right, instead of exploring it, right, and getting more honest about it.
Right.
So I'll wrap up here. I would really encourage that people who are recognizing this or looking at it and wondering about it, that you do start to just speak up and question those things. And I want to let you know that there is so much peace and beauty and just so much is possible out there that may not feel in reach for you. So if you feel like everything around you seems sort of happier and more healthy and fulfilling than what you are currently experiencing or feeling capable of, then I would offer you hope there. And that isn't like a hope in a life without pain or struggle or discomfort or growth, because that's life. But I will say, like, when I felt like it was all me and I was the problem and the only reason my marriage wasn't happy was me and the only reason I never felt loved was me, it was such a dark place. And what I can tell you guys is that I am coming out of that, and I still have so much pain and I have weird beliefs that come up and I got to confront them. And I have peace too. I don't just have pain and darkness. I have peace and I have real presence. I can be present, like with my kids and with myself. And I like being with myself. I didn't used to. I hated being alone before. And I feel closer to God. I'm building a real relationship there. And when I have friends or people around me, I feel connected to them. I'm able to be real with them. I'm able to talk to them about real life. And I'm bringing that into my business. I'm showing up and I'm able to be real there. And it is beautiful and it is worth the fight to get there. So yeah, that's what I want to offer to all of you.
Great. Well, that's good. I mean, definitely, having a relationship, with Jesus Christ and getting saved and all that is obviously going to help you, which you are. But anybody that's listening to this, any kind of, I believe, getting into the Bible and reading it and that kind of stuff is obviously going to help as well. But sure. Do you have any email, or do you have a not a Facebook, but you've got a website and stuff you'd like people to go to if they wanted to check you out, don't you?
Yes, that's correct. So autumnrose.com, and we'll put that in the notes. I'll send that to you. That's my website. And if you go to autumnrose.com, you can get added to my email list, and anyone who's on my email list will be the first ones to hear when my book is ready to go by, and also just events that I have that I'm putting on or speaking in. I have one in a couple weeks here, actually, free event online with me and others. So there's some fun stuff going on. So if you do want to be in my circle and kind of hear more from me, those are some ways to do it. Good. Yes.
Well, yes, I will include that website and all that stuff in the information down at the bottom of the podcast there in the comments. So if anybody has any questions or anything, you can get in touch with, me, or you can get in touch with her through her website or her email, anything like that. Of course, you can get in touch with me at truthseekers2012@gmail.com. Or also you can get in touch with me or any information you're looking for at kennywilliamson.com. So yeah. So I guess that would be it, unless you have anything else you'd like to say, to tell anybody.
No, that's great. Thank you so much. And I love this podcast you got going, and thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, I really appreciate it. And maybe we can do it again if you're interested.
I would love that.
All righty. Well, thanks for being on the show.
You bet. Take care.
Thanks again for listening to Melchizedek Chronicles. I know we sure enjoy having you guys listen to us. I hope you enjoy the show. If you do, please like it, share it, do whatever you can to get the word out. Our whole goal is to, get people saved, get people out of these kinds of circumstances, mentally, emotionally, being abused, and get them led to Jesus Christ, get people saved. Thanks again for listening, and God bless you.